Well, good morning. It's good to see you here today. It feels a little bit like a family reunion the first Sunday after Labor Day. We're back into some regular patterns of going back to school and coming to church, seeing friendly faces, hearing the choir, right? Giving it up to God, right, choir? We got a picnic afterwards. Come to the picnic. All sorts of good things and good food, even showing up between services out there on the buffet. So I hope you join us. And I do hope that you had a better summer than the guy who wrote today's gospel. Right? It sounds like he had some complicated family stuff going on, some issues with his neighbors, right? A renovation plan that didn't come together quite like he hoped, wasn't counting the cost. And we get dragged into it because Kate read it in the gospel. Thank you, Kate. But actually, that's okay. Because at Epiphany, we do not shy away from doing difficult things. In fact, as a community, we've learned that the very friction these kinds of texts create can lead us to a place of greater personal, communal, theological insight. It's a good thing. That's why we come, right? Right. So here's why I love this text. Because I believe in evolution, like Chuck Darwin. And I believe in Jesus. And I see those two forces coming together in the scripture that we have in front of us today. In fact, I think that these words of Jesus accelerate us towards an evolutionary upgrade, and we're perfectly tuned by Jesus 2,000 years ago to prepare us for the world as it is right now. Should I explain? So we begin today with hating families. Complicated text to open with, but I maintain this is a misunderstanding that gets us off on the wrong foot. Because you see, that word hate in the text is a Semitic idiom which really means to love less. It is a statement of priority. It is not a statement of feeling. For example, back in the book of Genesis, chapter 29, you have that scene where it says Jacob loved Rachel and hated Leah. But it really means Rachel was loved first and Leah second. We see the idiom again in Malachi 1, as you all know, where God says, is said to have loved Jacob and hated Esau. But that, again, is about priority and not hostility. So what Jesus is saying is our first priority must be God. And everything else, family and possessions and even life itself, must fall on the priority ladder. Now, why would he be doing this? Right? Is God that needy? Thin-skinned, petulant? Well, not at all, right? In fact, I believe Jesus is calling us through this passage to step up the evolutionary ladder. And I gained this insight through a guy named Giacomo Rizzolatti from Parma, Italy, right? Who is helpful, I believe, in explaining where Jesus is going with this text. Because you see, in 1992, recently for some of us, right? Recently, Rizzolatti published the very first paper on mirror neurons, which are neural networks that cause us to imitate the person upon which we gaze. Now, it's easy to understand how mirror neurons gave Homo sapiens an evolutionary advantage by creating a tribal adherence that kept the individual safe. So well-honed mirror neurons were a survival advantage for the child who could read the subtleties expressed on the adult's face and know how to act when a saber-toothed tiger wandered into camp. Or maybe just a lion or a bear. Any big problematic animal. Now, if Jesus was the Son of God, first person in creation, the Word made flesh, then Jesus understood mirror neurons. He got it. But his purpose wasn't to write papers or share information. Jesus came to teach us how to live. And more than that, he came to teach us how to live right now in this world as it is. You see, today, we don't need to read facial nuances to keep us safe from saber-toothed tigers. And yet, those neural pathways remain. So what Jesus is saying to 21st century humanity in today's gospel is how mirror neurons keep us safe in a world where chatbots are more of a threat than saber-toothed tigers. Which means we need to think anew about what people see when they look upon our faces. You with me? I'm reminded of the facial recognition power through an incident that happened this summer. See, my wife and I were driving from the Chautauqua Institute in upstate New York down to see our son who goes to college outside of Cleveland. And there we are in the car. And she said something to me, and I said something to her, and then she said something to me, and like I just exploded. And had one of you been sitting in the back seat of that car, you would have been like, dude, what? What was that about? I mean, where'd that come from? Do you know what I'm talking about? Now, we've been together for 40 years, and there's not a tick, there's not a swish of the eyelash, there's not a tilt of the head, there's not an intonation of the voice that I cannot read, even when she's in the balcony up here. See, I'm a genius savant at reading my wife. And she is the same for me. Because we have well-grooved mirror neurons for one another. Which is why there are no isolated incidences. There are no one-off comments. Everything has historical data points. That's the weight, if not the freight, of real personal incarnational relationship. Jesus understood this. Jesus really understood this. And he also understood the necessity of leveraging it to our evolutionary advantage in the age of chatbots. Which is why he said, you must love less your father and mother. You must love less your wife and children, your brothers and sisters, and even life itself if you want to be my follower. And again, none of you can be my followers if you do not love less your possessions. So what Jesus is saying to us is, look at me first. Look at me most. Let your mirror neurons reflect my love for you. Because that love, right, that God love, is what is going to chase the chatbots out and keep our children safe. I read an op-ed in the New York Times recently that claimed 72% of teenagers use chatbots for emotional and mental health support. 5.2 million of our young people. And I read another article that claimed over 1/3 of young people report their conversations with AI companions are more satisfying than real-life discussions. The only face our young people see when they look at a chatbot is their own. That is what it is. It is a reflection of the user with a bigger vocabulary. And that feels easier, feels safer. Even safer than when they're looking into the face of somebody they know, somebody who loves them, somebody who knows them, somebody who really, really, really cares for them. Because in a chatbot, there is no twitch of the eye. There is no tilt of the head. There is no intonation of the voice. There is no history written upon the face. Chatbots have no mirror neurons. It's just our words reflected back upon us. All we see in them is ourselves with a little flattery. Because the goal of the creators of the chatbots that roam the savannas of the virtual realm is to create a frictionless society. A world where everything is easy. There's nothing standing in the way of what you purchase. All relationships are curated, facts fudged, history manipulated, or even just cast off. That world is an anti-incarnational world. Jesus saw it coming 2,000 years ago, and he came and gave us tools to deal with that today, to keep our children safe. We see how this works through the early adopters. Technology always has early adopters, right? Those who modeled how to mold their mirror neurons to the person of Jesus. We call those people saints. Call them saints, but really they're just like you and me, honestly. There's Gregory of Nyssa in the 2nd century who wrote this: "The heart is transformed by what it gazes upon." There's Augustine of Hippo in the 4th century who wrote, "We become what we love." There's Catherine of Siena in the 14th century who wrote of Christ as the mirror into which we look and are changed. Folks called these people saints because when they met them, what they read upon their face was the love of Jesus. Right? Not a smirk of a brother, not a raised eyebrow of a father, not the intonation of their mother, but first and foremost, the love of Jesus. And when that love is the first love, all lesser relationships feel love more completely. It's that love, it's that Jesus love that moves us up the evolutionary ladder. That kind of love lightens the weight of historical data points. That kind of love is sticky, right? It empowers those who gaze upon it. Even today, we gaze back in history on the saints, on Gregory, on Augustine, on Catherine, to see the love of God. You with me? Now, I'm not saying we should get rid of technology. I'm not a Luddite. I'm not, I know. I think we should let the machines do things that machines do with information and algorithms so we can be expressions of our souls. So we can wear our soul's delight on our faces. So we can be together, soul to soul, with the people around us. So we can be more like a Gregory and Augustine and Catherine and less like Deutsch when he's driving to Cleveland. So how do we do that? Well, we spend more time looking at Jesus. Here at Epiphany, we curate many different ways to do that. Right? That's what we do on Sundays. Right? We have 5 different services every single Sunday to give people many different ways in which they can look upon Jesus. We got Bible study every week, 10 to 30. We have Kate's organizing small groups so communities can get together and study Jesus. That's what our women's retreat group does. That's what our men's group does. We have the Inquirers class. We have catechumenate classes. We have the Sunday forums. We have the Theology 400 series that I'll be teaching. We go on pilgrimages. We get the family parenting service that Kate's putting together for this fall. We have service and outreach. We have a lot of things going on here at Epiphany. And we don't do those things because we think we need to do them. We don't do those things to keep the church running. We don't do those things because Kate and I are just sitting around looking for stuff to do. We do those things because we believe it is critical for fighting back, for pushing back against the anti-incarnational world. See, we're standing, I believe, at the edge, right at an important evolutionary precipice. And in this moment, the church, what the church does, what the church teaches, matters more than ever. Because what the person of Jesus taught us 2,000 years ago, and that was just a moment of time, in time, evolutionarily, right? In the scale, that was nothing. That was a twitch of the eyebrow. What Jesus taught us 2,000 years ago remains profoundly relevant today for the well-being of our children. Because this is a complicated world. Is this? It is a complicated world, and it's changing fast, and tragedies sneak up on us even when we are doing our best. So remember Jesus. Right? Return to Jesus. Prioritize Jesus. Love Jesus more. Because to love Jesus more raises all our loves. It raises all the boats. To love Jesus more ensures that there is more love for everything. For our fathers and mothers, for our brothers and sisters, for our wives and children, maybe even for our possessions, and most certainly, as it said in the book of Deuteronomy today, certainly life itself. So I encourage you, I really want to encourage you this coming year to turn to Jesus more often than you might otherwise. Here at church, right? Through the programs we offer, through worship, maybe through picking up your Bible, opening it up and reading it more often than you might otherwise. Maybe just in your daily prayers. This is where we are at the beginning of the 21st century. We are at an inflection point, a place where we can either own, know, live into the power of our soul, or be overrun by the speed of information driven by algorithms that push us into places of isolation and anxiety. But God has something greater in mind. It's been on the books for 2,000 years. And Jesus, turning our face to Jesus, knowing Jesus, mirroring Jesus, is the way we live into God's greatest hope for the world. And all that happens in your neighborhood church. That's what we are designed to do. To be a place where we come to practice being love-spreading difference makers. Which is why we say, and you know, that the neighborhood church is the hope of the world.